Hi friends, we'll discuss an important current affairs, that is appointment of Chief Election Commissioner and Election Commissioners. So this is very important because recently a 5-judge constitution bench of Supreme Court has made some comment and also passed some remarks against the appointment procedure of the Chief Election Commissioners and Election Commissioners. So in that context we are discussing about this issue. The opinion expressed by the Supreme Court is the appointment procedure was not in accordance with the provisions mentioned in the Constitution, and also it is not maintaining independence as what we envisaged in the Constitution. That is the gist of that remarks. So now in this video we'll try to discuss what is the CEC and ECs, how they are appointed, what is the problem in their appointment, how we can improve that system. So before I enter into this appointment of CEC and ECs, it is very important to understand the importance of this institution as a whole. This institution, Election Commission of India, ECI. So the institution Election Commission of India have a mention in the Constitution under Article 324 of the Constitution. Election Commission of India is playing a vital role in the democracy because it conducts the election at a regular interval of time, and for the survival of the democracy, for the formation of the government, the effective functioning of the Election Commission of India is very important. And this Election Commission of India did a wonderful job in the last 75 years, and they have conducted the many elections, and Election Commission of India has also, the officers of Election Commission of India has went as an observer to observe the election process of some of the countries, and we have also given some inputs to improvise the election process of different countries, and it is having an amazing track record, and it is cited by many governments across the world. And perhaps India is the largest democracy where more than 90 crore voters are registered, and in the last general election it is more than 60 crore people use their vote, they have voted. So our Election Commission of India has professionalized, and they are got lot of experience in conducting the elections, and successfully they are doing it. But at the same time there are some aberration in the institute. So though we have an officers of very good record, but still there are some ifs and buts, like there are some officers, they have taken a decision which will favorable to the government. So these are something, that is why this demand came from different sections of society, like this process of appointing the Chief Election Commission and Election Commissioners should be independent of the government. That means it should not purely depending on the government, but some sort of autonomy must be maintained, and there should be some gap between this Election Commission of India and the government of the day. So that is why they filed a petition in the Supreme Court. One thing, yes, it is an institution which protects the democracy, which help us to flourish the democracy. Definitely it must be free from a complete executive control, and it also must take the opinion of the other institutions of the democracy. So this is an important aspect of the electoral reforms in this country, because we have created an election system and an electoral system, and every time, like how we are bringing reforms in various aspects of administration, like we also want to bring the reforms. Now when it comes to the electoral reforms, We have been bringing the reforms since so many years, and there are three major aspects of this electoral reforms. One is related to the Election Commission of India as an institution. We need to bring some reforms in it. Second one is the political parties and their organizational structure and their funding pattern. That is another aspect. Third one is, it is the election process or the methodology of the elections that we are conducting. These are the three major areas where we required some reforms, and now we are focusing on this ECI. So if you just bring some reforms in the Election Commission of India, if you completely remove the ECI from the control of the executive, will it solve the whole problem of elections in the India? No, it won't. But at the same time, this is a necessary reform that you must bring. And for this reason, some people approach the Supreme Court. And this bringing reforms in the office of Election Commission of India is not a new thing. Since 1990, various committees are recommended for bringing some reforms. And in the year 2017, when it was brought to the notice of Supreme Court with a public interest litigation, then the Supreme Court opinioned that this issue must be dealt with a larger bench. That's why they said, like, okay, we will transfer it to a larger bench, because a constitution bench should decide, because when we are appointing the chief election commissioner and election commissioners, is it a constitutional procedure? Does really constitution envisage the method of this method of appointment? So that's why they said it must be looked by a larger bench. Again, it was taken to the notice of the Supreme Court in the year 2018. They reiterated what they mentioned it in 2017, like it can only dealt with the constitution bench. Again, in the year 2019, PIL was filed in the Supreme Court. Then Supreme Court has decided to constitute a constitutional bench to hear the matters of the appointment of CEC and ECs. As a result, Supreme Court constituted a constitution bench, and that bench is hearing this matter. And when that matter is hearing by the Supreme Court judges made some comments, and in that context we are discussing about this issue. So one thing you must understand, it is a part of major electoral reforms that you are going to bring in this country. First one. Second one is, we are looking into the constitutionality of the appointments of CEC and ECs in the Election Commission of India. So these are the two important aspects. Now, so before I enter into what is the procedure and all, first of all, let me see what are the constitutional provisions of Election Commission, that means Article 324, and later I will enter into what are the problems and how we can bring some reforms in this. So this Article 324 is dealing about Election Commission of India, and the Article 324 consisting of 6 clauses. 6 clauses. In these 6 clauses, to understand this topic, we must be very careful about this clause 2 and clause 5. Not that remaining clauses are not important, they are not important for the today's discussion. So the first clause of Article 324 says about the superintendent's direction and control of the preparation of the electoral rolls and conduct of the elections to the parliament, state legislature, the president and vice president. And the second one deals about the organization consisting of chief election commissioner and such any other number of election commissioner prescribed by the President of India from time to time. That means this clause says that there shall be a chief election commissioner and any number of ECs that are fixed by the President of India from time to time, subjected to any provision made by any law of the Parliament. So that means President of India will appoint CEC and any number of ECs, and he can fix the number of ECs from time to time, but this whole thing is subjected to a parliamentary law. So this is the appointment process of the CEC and ECs. Constitution mentions it clearly. One CEC, ECs depending on the time, that can be decided by the President. President of India will appoint this, and that is subjected to a parliamentary law. Anyway, the third clause related to, suppose if you have multiple number of ECs, then the CEC acts as a chairman to this Election Commission of India. If it is only CEC, he is the chairman, but if there are more than one ECs, then definitely the CEC acts as a chairman. And the fourth clause dealing about regional commissioner. So if it is required, the President of India can appoint a regional commissioner. So this is clause 4. And clause 5, it is important. So this clause 5 deals with the conditions of service and tenure. The conditions of service and tenure. So what are the service conditions of the either Chief Election Commissioner or election commissioners? So this was mentioned it in, but in the clause 5, if you see clearly, subjected to the provision of any parliamentary law, the President of India will prescribe the service and tenure details of the Chief Election Commissioner and other election commissioners. So here also they are talking about President will prescribe, but there is a parliamentary law. And again here they mentioned about the removal process of the Chief Election Commissioner, and here it is clearly mentioned like the Chief Election Commissioner will be removed like the Supreme Court judge, both in terms of manner and as well as the ground. The ground is proved misbehavior and incapacity. The manner is both the houses of parliament has to be approved with the special majority. So like how a Supreme Court judge is removed, likewise the Chief Election Commissioner will be removed. But what about election commissioners? When it comes to the election commissioners are the regional election commissioner if you appoint. So both the people will be removed by the President of India on the advice of Chief Election Commissioner. So this is what Constitution says. So Constitution says like CEC can be removed like how Supreme Court judge is removed, but when it comes to the election commissioners and regional election commissioners, they will be removed by the President of India on the advice of Chief Election Commissioner, but they don't have the same procedure for like how we are removing the Chief Election Commissioner. So this is the difference. And sixth one is related to the staff availability. That means when during the election process, the Election Commission of India can request President of India and Governor of a state to make adjustment of the staff from the respective, that means from either from the union or from the state. So here these two are very important for us. So the clause 2 deals with the appointment procedure. Here the appointment procedure is President will appoint CEC and any number of ECs fixed from time to time subjected to a parliamentary law. Clause number 5 deals with the subjected to a parliamentary law. President of India prescribes the service and tenure and also the removal process mentioned like CEC is like Judge of Supreme Court and the ECs and REC is removed by the President on the advice of CEC. Now here there is a parliamentary law. Here there is a parliamentary law. So Constitution has clearly mentioned that President of India is having a power, but it is subjected to a legislation, subjected to a parliamentary legislation. Do we have such parliamentary legislation in our country? Yes. When we have framed that legislation, that legislation was brought it in the year 1991. That legislation was brought it in the year 1991. So what is that legislation? The legislation is the Election Commission Conditions of Service Act of 1991. The Election Commission Conditions Service Act of 1991 we have brought. Then prior to 1991 there was no parliamentary law. Then how we have appointed and how we decided the service conditions? Prior to 1991, President of India with its own executive order, he has appointed and he described the service conditions of the Chief Election Commissioners. Why actually we have brought the law in the year 1991? What was the reason to pass a separate law? The reason was we have started changing the composition of the Election Commission of India. Up to 1989, the Election Commission of India was a single member body. That means only Chief Election Commissioner was there. But in the year 1989, Rajiv Gandhi government has made it as a multi-member body. Why we have made it as multi-member body? The reason for the multi-member body is the Chief Election Commissioner is not listening to the government. That is why they wanted to add 2 more election commissioner. And if you observe the constitution clearly, constitution never created a hierarchy of election commissioners. Constitution never created a hierarchy of election commissioners. They said like if it is a multi-member body, CEC will act as a chairman. But nowhere they mention like CEC is above the ECs or CEC is having a veto power over ECs. That they have not mentioned. So that is why what we did it, along with the CEC we have brought 2 ECs. That means 2 election commissioners. With this what happened? If these 2 people agrees, even if CEC don't agree, you can take a decision. So that is why to compromise the independence of the Election Commission of India, we created a 3-member body. Again in the year 1990, the VP Singh government made it a single member body. And after that, Government of India tried to bring a constitutional amendment to bring some changes to protect the autonomy of the Election Commission of India, but they could not do it. They have introduced a bill but they have withdrawn it. And after that, again in the year 1993 and during in the year 1993 we have again brought an ordinance and later we passed it as an act. And with this again you created a multi-member body, that means multi-member Election Commission of India. So in between 1990 and 91 we have created, we brought this act. So why we have brought this act? By this time already the various committees like Dinesh Goswami committee recommended like Election Commission of India should become a multi-member body, and he suggested the strength of let it be 3. So when you are appointing the election commissioners, the election commissioners are also having the same amount of salaries and perks, and in case of decision making they are also having equal power. So to ensure that we have brought this 1991 Act. So in the 1991 Act it is clearly mentioned like they enjoy the same status and receive the same salary and perks as equivalent to that of the judge of the Supreme Court. Our constitution mentioned it. Our constitution mentioned implicitly, but in the year 1991 Act we made it so explicit. That means we have created a body of 3 members who are having same status, who draws the same salary. And in the year 1991 when we have brought, we have clearly mentioned like the act is something like Chief Election Commissioner and other election commissioners Conditions of Service Act 1993, that we have brought the amendment to that. So this is how we have brought a legislation. Now this legislation is talking about the salary or the perks or any of the conditions of the election commissioners and chief election commissioner. But did this legislation is clearly mentioning about the method of appointment? No. Actually your constitution says like President of India will appoint CEC and other amount, the other number fixed by the President of India as ECs from time to time, subjected to the law made by the Parliament. Prior to 1991 there was no law, President used to appoint. In the year 1991 when we brought a law, we talked about the salaries, we talked about the other perks and the conditions of the status, but we haven't talked about the mode of appointment. So even after 1991, still the President of India is only appointing. That means if you observe the article 324 clearly, in the article 324, to ensure the implementation of clause 5, that means the service conditions, we have brought a law in the year 1991. But to ensure the implementation of the clause 2, which speaks about the appointment procedure, there is no law. This law neither dealing about it, and we don't have any exclusive law. So this was the condition. This was the condition of the appointment of Chief Election Commissioner and Election Commissioners of India. So if there is no parliamentary law, then how President of India is doing the appointment? So President of India is doing the appointment according to a procedure. And actually when you are making a law in the Parliament, the Parliament should clearly prescribe what are the qualifications, what is the tenure, and anywhere removal process is mentioned it in the constitution itself, but at least the qualification and the tenure must be clearly mentioned, and this was not there. And when it comes to the tenure, and we have been practicing since independence that they will hold the office for 6 years or attainment of 65 years of age, whichever is earlier. This will be applicable to both CEC and ECs. Again we have mentioned it in the 1991 Act. So the 1991 Act mentioned about the tenure, and prior to that there was no act. President of India used to prescribe. That means if you appoint as a CEC, you can hold the office for 6 years or completion of 65 years, whichever is earlier. If you appointed as any election commissioner, you will hold the office for 6 years or completion of 65 years, whichever is earlier. Now who will appoint? President of India appoint. Is there any procedure? There is an internal procedure, but not explicit procedure decided by the Parliament. What is that internal procedure? Normally the retired civil servants, so a group of people are selected and a panel, then internal panel will list out some, will choose some names, and these names will be sent to the Prime Minister, and Prime Minister recommends to the President. So this is how it is happening. So from the pool of retired officers, the selected officers list will be sent to the Prime Minister, and Prime Minister looks into it and will recommend one name to the President, and President appoints them as either CEC or ECs. So this is how it happened. Now what is the problem with this procedure? Okay, if Prime Minister recommend to the President, then what is the problem with this? The problem here is, this is a very important institution, and take the case of some of the institutions like CIC, CVC, CBI, Human Rights Commission, like there are some other institutions in this country where the appointment process is done by a group of people but not government alone. Why actually we have created such structure? Because these are some of the institutions which will ensure the accountability of the system. Definitely it must be freed from the complete executive control. as far as appointment is concerned. That is why we say, like, when you are appointing, it's not the government alone, but government, that means Prime Minister plus leader of the opposition plus the Chief Justice of India or any senior judge. Like that we have created a committees, or we are created a body called collegium to choose the heads of these institutions. Likewise, and they are not the constitutional bodies, simply they are statutory bodies, and some are even not statutory bodies like CBI. The point is, so the Election Commission of India is really such an important body, and it must ensure the confidence among the different sections of the country, including various political parties and other institutions. Why it is only left to the President of India? Moreover, your constitution says that the parliament should make a law, and we made a law, but in that we conveniently skip that procedure. So now the demand is like, now you need to make a law, and in that law certainly you need to create a committee like structure or a collegium like structure where we should have a representation from opposition party and as well as the Supreme Court or the judiciary, so that this combined body will select who will be the CEC or the ECs of the Election Commission of India. So for that actually a PIL was filed. So a PIL was filed to create this type of mechanism, because it ensures the independence, it ensures the autonomy of the institution. Now, regarding this particular thing, there are already various committees have given some recommendations, and it is not only related to the appointment, it is also related to the removal process. What is that removal process? The Chief Election Commissioner is having the constitutional protection. That means he cannot be removed until both the House of Parliament passes a resolution with a special majority. But whereas when it comes to the ECs, so they are becoming like a probationary officers, they don't have any fixed tenure. Like the act mentioned in the year 1991, like you will enjoy 6 years, but they can be removed with the advice of the CEC. So these people don't have any tenure. That means no fixed thing. They can be removed at any point of time, but the removal of CEC is very difficult. That's why some people say, like, no, both the people should have the same amount of constitutional protection. This is another thing. But anyhow, various committees have recommended for it. So what are the various committees recommended? One is Dinesh Goswami committee. Dinesh Goswami committee is very famous because the electoral reforms of the Dinesh Goswami committee are have its own relevant even today. They have their own relevance even today. And what this Dinesh Goswami committee said? Dinesh Goswami committee said when it comes to the appointment process, actually Dinesh Goswami was the former law minister. Dinesh Goswami. He said, like, the Election Commission of India should be a multi-member body. It is in 1990. Multi-member body. And in this, one CEC and 2 EC should be there. And the appointment process should be done by the Prime Minister, leader of the opposition and Chief Justice of India. Accordingly, you have to pass a law, a parliamentary law. That is what he said. So there must be a law, statutory backing should be there to this process. And when it comes to the protection of the salary, that must be clearly mentioned it in the constitution, because when it comes to the salary, it is not mentioned in the constitution. They receive, both CEC and EC receive the salary as that of the Supreme Court judge, but that was mentioned it in the legislation. So you have to explicitly make it in the constitution. That is what the another recommendation of the Dinesh Goswami. And the another thing is, when it comes to the expenditure, actually he said, like, expenditure of the Election Commission should not be charged on the Consolidated Fund of India, should be voted out of Consolidated Fund of India. That means you no need a special protection when it comes to the drawing of the funds. Voted is fine because constitution not mentioned it as charge and expenditure, so it is voted, so the voted should continue. So barring this third one, but remaining two are very important to protect the independence of the election commission. So this is the Dinesh Goswami, and after Dinesh Goswami committee, we have appointed another committee called a committee to review the working of the constitution under the chairmanship of Justice 𝐿𝐴𝐻𝐺𝐬. And even 𝐿𝐴𝐻𝐺𝐬 commission recommended like a multi-member body to appoint both the chief election commissioner and as well as the election commissioners. And what was that multi-member body? He used a different thing: prime minister, leader of the opposition in the Lok Sabha, leader of the opposition in the Rajya Sabha, speaker of the Lok Sabha and deputy chairman of Rajya Sabha. Like that he has given another body. But the point is, they are in opinion like the present mode of appointment where president is directly appointing on the advice of prime minister is not the spirit of the constitution. The constitution clearly mentioned like there should be a proper procedure, and we could not do it. That is why these people advocates like this process could be better. And after that, various law commissions are also given recommendation. And what this law commission said? Law commission said in their report, first of all they said like constitutional protection to both CEC and ECs. If you looking into the clause 5 of article 324, it talks about the removal process of CEC, and the law commission is said like the same protection should also be applicable to the election commissioners and regional election commissioners. That means if President of India want to remove both election commissioners and as well as regional election commissioner, it must be like the CEC. That means it is something like a judge of the Supreme Court. That protection must be extended, and the tenure of the ECs and RECs should not merely depending on the CEC, because his recommendation is important. So that is one thing they mentioned. And the second one is make the appointment process consultative. That means now under the present procedure you are not consulting anybody, so make the appointment process consultative. That means there must be a body, consultative body, like leader of opposition, prime minister, and let it be the chief justice of India. And here they have talked about create a permanent secretariat. So permanent secretariat means now when it comes to the election duty, under the clause 6 of the article 324, election commission requests the president of India and governor of a state so that they will arrange the staff for election duty. But as an election commission, it works regularly, so it also needs a permanent secretariat, and the rules and regulations of the officers working under election commission of India should be decided by ECI. But now they are depending on DOPT to get the officers on deputation from All India services and from central services. So that means here they are recommended like no, there should be a permanent secretariat for Election Commission of India to have its own permanent staff and to decide the conditions of its own staff. Okay, so these are the recommendations given by the Law Commission. So if you observe, and not only this, the various other chief election commissioners who worked in the past, they themselves recommended like no, this appointment by the government alone is not correct, there should be a consultative body. So if you observe all these things, the various committees have recommended for reforms in the Election Commission of India. They have just not only recommended for the reforms in Election Commission of India, they have given in general a broader reforms for the whole electoral process, including the political parties, their organization, their funding, and also the system of election. They have recommended for many things. But when it comes to the Election Commission, already recommendations were there. And there are various petitions in front of the Supreme Court in earlier also. That is why now the Supreme Court has taken it seriously. It's not a suo motu intervention. Someone has challenged it. That is why Supreme Court is intervening it. Now, what is the demand of the petitioners? Or in general, what the public is demanding in this country regarding the office of the Election Commission of India. So, one thing is, they are making it clear, the appointment process should be consultative. So, who you will choose, that's all depending on the Parliament of India to decide, but you need to change the appointment process. Constitution envisages for a law, so definitely either you will amend the 1991 Act or you will bring the Comprehensive Act, but clearly mention about the appointment procedure, and that will give effect to implement the clause 2 of the Article 324, and you clearly mention the qualification. And you clearly mention the collegium or any committee that you are going to consult, and you clearly mention, because there is another argument, why only should bureaucrat be appointed as the election commissioners and chief election commissioners. Okay, there is an argument like these people are having a lot of experience in conducting the elections throughout their service, and some people say like no, some technocrats can also do it, but anyhow that is a matter of debate, but we must have a clear-cut legislation. So that is the one thing that they are demanding. Second one is, you must amend the constitution. You must amend the constitution. For what purpose? You must amend the constitution for protection to the institution rather to the individual. So protection to the institution rather to the individual. That means till now CEC is having the protection, Chief Election Commissioner. Election commissioners don't have protection. So you no need to create the protection to the individual. Give the constitutional protection to the CEC. That means whoever is heading that election commission of India, that includes CEC and ECs, should have a same protection like that of the how judges of the Supreme Court are having. So you extend that protection to the institution. The second amendment is required, like the expenses of the Election Commission of India are charged on the consolidated fund of India. So this is some people are suggesting, because this is an institution, sometime need to censure the people who are in the office also. See, one of the allegations of the Election Commission is like these people are, while announcing the dates, they are favoring the government, so that the government will announce some of the projects to the electioneering, the states which are going for the election, and they are conveniently deciding the number of phases of the election to favor the ruling party, and they are not censuring the ministers and sometimes prime minister and important ministers. So there are some allegations are there, there are some aberrations are there. Now in that case, if Election Commission is so strict about the government of the day, then who has to sanction the budget to the Election Commission of India? It is the government of India, it comes under the law ministry. So then they may reduce the budget, so that will impact the performance of the office. So without voting by the Parliament, what Election Commission of India decided, that much amount of money should be sanctioned to them without depending on the executive and legislature. So for that, you must made the expenses of the Election Commission of India as charged on the consolidated fund of India. This is also one demand. The another thing is related to the promotion of ECs and CECs. Promotion of ECs into CEC. And here itself I also discuss about the security of tenure. Security of the tenure. So the Supreme Court asked the same question. Supreme Court asked, like your legislation and your previous precedents are saying like Chief Election Commissioner and Election Commissioner shall hold the office for 6 years, or until attain the age of 65 years. See, show me how many Chief Election Commissioners have completed the 6 years after session, TN session. That means after 1996, how many of the CECs have completed their tenure of 6 years as CEC? No one has completed. Is it not a mockery of what you have written in the act? Why you are not allowing a chief election commissioner to continue to complete his total tenure? And you know that because it is until age of 65 years or 6 years, deliberately you are appointing the officers who cannot complete their tenure 6 years. Why you are doing it? No, this is not correct. But here some people are saying like, no, some ECs are promoted to CEC and jointly as a EC and CEC they are enjoying a tenure of 6 years. But the laws never clearly mention like as a jointly CEC and EC you should complete the 6 years. They said like this is 6 years and this is 6 years. But the point is, okay, sometimes CECs may not complete the 6 years of tenure. They are completing, let it be 2 years as a CEC and they might have completed 4 years of EC. That means total 6 years. The point here, it is not like CEC should be sit for 6 years. The only thing, if you make ECs equivalent to CEC in every aspect, then there is no question and there is no debate of security of tenure. If EC and CEC are equal in all respect, now at present in taking the decision they are same, in drawing the salary they are same, but when it comes to the tenure of the office, the EC is something depending on CEC. If you make it clear like through the constitutional protection, then there is no question of the security of tenure. And another important thing is this ECs into CEC. So how CEC will be appointed? Sometimes you want to promote the ECs into CEC, but is it compulsory like every EC should become the CEC? It's not required. But if at all you want to promote, you must take the seniority into consideration. And some people are saying like you must make it clear that a senior most EC will become the next CEC. And if you want to go with, no, I can appoint anyone as the CEC, I can appoint anyone as the EC, there is no compulsion for me to promote the ECs into CEC, everyone must have an equal protection. If everyone is having the equal protection, perhaps there is no debate about the tenure and the promotions as well. Okay, so these are some of the aspects that we are demanding. And like many people are demanding, and some are demanded in the PIL filed in front of the Supreme Court, And there is another thing regarding the permanent secretary. Some people are saying like if you just change the election commissioners and chief election commissioner, it's not sufficient. You bring a structural reform in the sense you bring complete a secretary, you bring a change in the whole secretariat system and you create a permanent secretariat. So these are the 4 demands that people are demanding, and these 4 will clearly fulfill the provisions of 324 class 2 and 324 class 5. That is required. But the point is, does really the Supreme Court is going to give the judgment that you must bring this law? Can a judiciary gives the order to the legislature to pass a law? No, judiciary cannot do it. The judiciary, what it can do is, it can struck down the existing legislation. It can do that to that extent, and it can advise the government or it can advise the legislature to bring a legislation. But perhaps it is the duty of the legislature to pass a legislation, and it involves the constitutional amendment and it involves the major legislative changes. Definitely the executive has to accept first. So first of all the executive has to come, and then it must convince the legislature. If they come up with a clear-cut legislation to fulfill the provisions of the constitution, then it will be very good, then it will be a good thing. Okay. And there is another thing, like there are other constitutional bodies also there. Let it be like Public Service Commission, let it be C&AG, let it be now SC/ST Commission, they are having the constitutional status. See, now for all these things, it is not a collegium system, it's not a committee system. Then tomorrow they may ask like everybody should have, only judiciary is having the collegium system, but again we are having a problem that collegium should consisting of only members of judiciary or only members of executive, or members of executive and judiciary, who should have an overriding power. These are all, we are debating it. But when it comes to the other constitutional bodies, there is no system like collegium. So tomorrow they may ask for the same collegium system for all the other constitutional bodies, because UPSC is also important, C and AG is equally important. So the point is, yes, the demands may come in future and you must see a case by case. Definitely, if that is required, some aberrations are there, we need to bring it. But that doesn't mean that if someone is going to ask or everyone is going to ask, so I don't implement the reform, that is not an appropriate thing. Perhaps the time has arisen where we need to change the structure of the mode of the whole structural reforms, and also the mode of appointment of CEC and ECs. And one more thing, the reforming the Election Commission of India alone will not solve the problem of the Indian electoral system. There are other things like the political parties and also the system of election. Definitely we need to bring that changes in that system also. But now we need to take a call on this Election Commission of India as an institution. Okay, thank you.
Amrita IAS Academy.